Look closely at the pristine image of Dubai, a gleaming metropolis of glass and steel, the highest skyscrapers piecing the clouds, a global tourism hub pulling in millions of visitors every single year. But step just a few miles away from the downtown core. The luxury abruptly stops. This is the edge of the city, where a silent, relentless invasion is happening right now. It is not a sudden financial crash. It is not a violent geopolitical conflict. It is something much slower and much more unstoppable, a physical erasure of multi-million-dollar real estate. The tourism brochures promise eternal summer and boundless luxury, but they hide the immense, daily cost of keeping the desert from reclaiming its territory. Dubai has never tamed nature. It is simply renting space using billions of dollars, and the rent is becoming violently expensive to pay. This is the untold side of the Dubai tourism crisis, where the pressure of an oversupplied real estate market meets the unforgiving reality of geography. To understand this sentence, you must forget about generic climate change. Look directly at a mechanical weapon that is scraping away Dubai's luxury every single day. When tourists flock to the luxurious marinas and towering hotels, they do not see the invisible war being fought on the outskirts of the city. Over the past 2 decades, real estate developers pushed further and further into the arid landscape. They sought cheaper land to build sprawling luxury villas, desperate to attract foreign investors and maintain the illusion of endless economic growth. This aggressive expansion is directly tied to the underlying vulnerabilities of the local economy. The city relies entirely on the perception of total environmental control to sustain its premium appeal. If that image cracks, the investment stops, and the broader tourism sector suffers. But the desert is not an empty, passive canvas waiting to be developed. It is an active, aggressive geological force. The sand is moving constantly, every single second of every single day, driven by relentless thermal winds sweeping across the Arabian Peninsula. These shifting dunes are not just a scenic, golden backdrop for high-paying safari tours. They are an active, physical threat encroaching on billion-dollar property developments. The sheer volume of sand being displaced daily is mathematically staggering. The city must deploy a colossal army of heavy machinery, running on expensive diesel fuel, just to keep the arterial roads clear for residents and tourism excursions. The infrastructure is under immense, compounding pressure. The further the city expands outwards, the harder it becomes to defend the fragile perimeter. The gleaming walls of the new suburbs are essentially standing squarely in the middle of a geological highway. And this massive natural sandblasting machine is aiming directly at the most naive weakness of modern architects. To comprehend the true scale of this destruction, we must look at the microscopic physics of a phenomenon called saltation. This is the exact process of sand particles leaping and bouncing violently across the ground. A grain of desert sand is not soft dust. It is a microscopic crystal of pure quartz. Under an electron microscope, it reveals sharp, jagged, razor-like edges. When the desert winds reach critical speeds of 50 kilometers per hour, these quartz crystals are picked up and hurled forward. They travel in a violent, low-level storm, crashing into the ground and launching other particles into the air. Millions of microscopic projectiles hitting surfaces continuously. It is a natural, planetary-scale, sandblasting machine, operating 24 hours a day. Modern luxury architecture in Dubai relies heavily on vast expanses of structural glass, exposed steel beams, and flawless, high-gloss automotive paint jobs. The entire tourism and real estate appeal is built on this pristine, transparent, highly polished aesthetic. But saltation weaponizes the very environment against these delicate structures. The kinetic energy of billions of bouncing quartz grains acts like heavy grit sandpaper on a macroscopic scale. We are talking about an environment where the air itself is fiercely abrasive. The wind picks up a grain, carries it forward, and smashes it into the base of the walls, causing a chain reaction of devastating collisions that slowly eats away at the foundation of the buildings. This localized storm is constantly, silently eroding the boundaries of the newest suburbs. It is a fundamental physics problem that endless amounts of marketing money cannot magically solve. But the destroyed facades are only the surface. What is truly crushing the wallets of the ultra-rich lies silently on their roofs. The severity of this continuous erosion is dictated by the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. On this universal scientific scale, quartz sand sits firmly at a level 7. The expensive tempered glass windows and the premium paint on luxury vehicles only reach a hardness level of 5.5 or 6. The mathematics of this physical interaction are simple and incredibly brutal. The softer material will always lose. The specialized low-emissivity thermal coatings applied to luxury villa windows are being systematically scratched and blasted away by the wind. Once this critical thermal barrier is compromised, the insulation of the entire house fails entirely. The intense desert radiation penetrates the degraded glass, and the villa begins to bake from the inside. The aesthetic degradation directly impacts the high-end tourism and expatriate rental markets. Wealthy tenants, who expect perfection, refuse to pay premium rental rates for a villa with permanently foggy, scratched windows and heavily sandblasted exterior walls. The logistical cost of replacing these vast, custom glass panels is astronomical, and replacing them is not a one-time permanent fix. It rapidly becomes a recurring, agonizing maintenance cycle that drains building reserves. The beautiful, transparent walls that developers sell as a seamless connection to nature transform rapidly into a severe financial liability. The homes become inescapable heat traps, absorbing the fierce, unforgiving radiation of the Middle Eastern sun. As the interior temperatures rise to dangerous, unlivable levels, the residents must rely entirely on artificial cooling just to survive the afternoon. But the destroyed facades are only the surface. What is truly crushing the wallets of the ultra-rich lies silently on their roofs. Look up at the roofs of these luxury villas and massive commercial tourism centers, and you will find the true hidden victims of this invisible invasion. The mechanical lungs of the buildings. The vast heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, these crucial machines are forced into inhaling air filled with PM 2.5 particulate matter. In the unique coastal humidity of the Arabian Gulf, this extremely fine dust mixes with moisture in the air to create a thick, dense cement like mud. This mud permanently coats the delicate cooling coils and sophisticated filters of the air conditioning units. Ordinary commercial filters are useless against it. The compressors are forced to run at 150% of their designed capacity, working desperately to combat the failing glass insulation and the extreme heat outside. In a normal temperate city, a commercial-grade air conditioning unit can easily last for 15 years. In the hostile, abrasive environment of the Dubai suburbs, that lifespan plummets to a mere 4 or 5 years. A failing cooling unit in a luxury desert resort immediately triggers a severe guest crisis and immediate reputational damage. As the machines struggle to breathe, energy consumption skyrockets, creating a devastating thermodynamic feedback loop. The harder the systems work, the more heat they exhaust into the surrounding local environment, and the faster their internal components degrade from the abrasive mud. Maintenance crews are permanently trapped in an endless cycle of repairing and replacing these exhausted units. The beautiful, cool silence inside the living rooms is entirely subsidized by the screaming, choking machines dying on the roofs. To save these machines, Dubai did what any city would do. They built massive concrete walls to block the wind, but they did not expect that they had just created an accelerator for the desert. The strategic decision to build immense perimeter walls seemed perfectly logical on a planner's spreadsheet. It is the basic instinct of every ancient desert fortress. But modern urban planners failed to properly account for the complex aerodynamic paradox of solid barriers. Wind tunnel physics dictate a harsh, undeniable reality. When a solid concrete wall completely blocks the wind, it immediately kills the kinetic energy of the air current. Because the wind speed drops drastically upon hitting the wall, the air can no longer carry the heavy sand particles it swept up from the dunes. Consequently, the wind simply drops its heavy payload of sand right at the base of the wall. The very barrier designed to keep the hostile desert out instantly becomes an anchor point for the formation of a brand new dune. Day by day, week by week, the new dune grows higher and thicker against the concrete, gradually forming a perfect, sloping ramp. Within a few short months of intense wind activity, the sand simply walks over the top of the defensive wall and begins to swallow the community from the inside. The street sweepers deployed by the city are completely useless against a fully formed dune breaching the perimeter. This is a catastrophic aerodynamic failure. The more rigid and solid the defense, the faster the desert adapts and climbs over it. Suburbs, built with towering security walls, are essentially facilitating their own burial. The residential streets begin to fill with creeping sand that traps vehicles. The vital access roads required for tourism excursions and emergency response become dangerously blocked. The physical boundaries of the city are actively being rewritten by the wind. When traditional physics fails miserably, the authorities cry out for core technology, smart cities. But this is exactly when the tragic comedy of macro-engineering takes the throne. Desperate to bypass the physical limitations of massive concrete walls, the city turned to the ultimate promise of the digital age. They invested billions in the vision of a high-tech, autonomous, smart city. Solar panels covering thousands of residential roofs, artificial intelligence monitoring complex infrastructure, automated sensors regulating water and power distribution across the grid. But they severely underestimated the intense digital friction caused by the harsh desert environment. The blowing sand naturally carries a strong static electric charge. This abrasive, highly charged dust easily infiltrates sensitive electronic housings, causing frequent, unpredictable short circuits in critical sensors and communication nodes. More importantly, the electrical efficiency of those incredibly expensive solar panels drops by up to 40% in just a matter of days due to the thick, persistent accumulation of opaque dust. This reveals the ultimate, painful irony of the futuristic Dubai narrative. To maintain the glittering illusion of a fully autonomous, artificial intelligence-driven metropolis, the city is forced to deploy an enormous army of low-wage human laborers. Thousands of workers armed with hoses, water tanks, and brooms must manually scrub the solar panels and sweep the automated streets every single night. The highly advertised digital utopia is completely, desperately dependent on grueling, manual human friction. This heavy reliance on constant human intervention is incredibly expensive, environmentally wasteful, and profoundly inefficient. The sleek tourism narrative of a frictionless, futuristic city of tomorrow is literally washed clean by invisible workers under the cover of darkness. It is a severe misallocation of both capital and human resources. Why would an elite team of engineers put themselves in this foolish endgame? The answer is not in the materials, but in a geometric crime within the original planning. The root of this escalating crisis cannot be blamed entirely on the extreme weather. It was deliberately drafted on the drawing boards of ambitious urban planners. We must carefully analyze a critical concept in spatial economics known as the perimeter-to-area ratio. To maximize the sale of premium lots, Dubai property developers actively abandoned compact, highly defensible grid layouts. Instead, they designed sprawling, highly branched suburbs, entire communities shaped like colossal palm trees or intricate spider webs crawling deep into the empty desert. This design brilliantly maximizes the amount of property directly facing the open desert, allowing real estate brokers to sell more homes at a premium price to eager foreign investors. They sold this sprawling geometry as an exclusive feature, promising endless, unobstructed views. But it exponentially increases the sheer physical length of the border exposed to the hostile environment. There is absolutely no defense in depth. A dense, compact city presents a very small surface area to the punishing wind. A sprawling, highly branched development exposes the maximum possible surface area to the abrasive sandstorms. Every single luxury home built on the edge becomes a frontline trench in a war it simply cannot win. This is a catastrophic, macro-geometric crime against urban planning. The financial cost of defending this endless, winding perimeter is mathematically unsustainable in the long term. It requires a permanent, mobilized fleet of heavy cleaning vehicles spread across an impossibly thin defensive line. It is an architecture of arrogance, built on the fatal assumption that maintenance budgets would be unlimited forever. And this fatal geometric mistake has triggered a financial time bomb that no real estate broker will ever dare to tell you about. The compounding financial consequences of this sprawling geometry are quietly devastating the suburban property market. The immense daily cost of the mechanized sweeping fleets, the rapid replacement of choked air conditioning units, and the endless specialized scrubbing of damaged structural glass. All of it must be paid for. These colossal, unavoidable operational costs are quietly passed down directly to the property owners in the form of mandatory annual service charges. As the desert pushes harder and the infrastructure ages, these management fees bloat massively, eating entirely into the projected rental income. Suddenly, the expected yield on the luxury real estate investment turns sharply negative. The pristine asset becomes a bloodthirsty liability, demanding constant cash injections just to remain physically habitable. Recognizing the trap, owners naturally try to sell their properties to escape the fees, but the secondary market freezes, creating a brutal, inescapable liquidity trap. Smart institutional investors and banks read the financial statements, see the rising insurance premiums, and absolutely refuse to buy into a failing battle against the sand. This is exactly where the broader tourism crisis intersects heavily with the dangerous real estate oversupply. A highly advertised luxury destination filled with struggling, sand-swept, partially empty developments rapidly loses its premium global appeal. The glittering illusion of effortless wealth is violently replaced by the grim reality of compounding maintenance debt. The fundamental economic vulnerability of the entire system is laid bare, heavily reliant on a constant influx of new foreign capital to pay for the rapidly decaying infrastructure of the old. To stop this value collapse, they are desperately applying a fake ecological measure, a solution that, in reality, is poisoning the entire planet. Faced with encroaching dunes, rising temperatures, and plummeting property values, the city planners implemented a vast, highly publicized green belt strategy. They began planting millions of trees and expansive stretches of water, intensive grass, along the suburban borders to physically stabilize the shifting sand. In the glossy tourism brochures and corporate sustainability reports, it looks absolutely perfect. An eco-friendly, green oasis bravely fighting back the encroaching desert. But the underlying mechanics of this solution are ecologically terrifying. To keep these non-native thirsty plants alive in a severely arid environment, the city must continuously desalinate millions of gallons of seawater every single day. The industrial desalination process burns colossal amounts of fossil fuels, consuming enormous amounts of electricity just to run the pumps. Furthermore, the factories pump superheated, hypersaline toxic brine back into the Arabian Gulf, devastating local marine ecosystems and destroying regional biodiversity. They are literally burning massive amounts of carbon and actively accelerating global climate change just to keep a local patch of decorative grass green for the investors. The accelerated global warming then makes the regional droughts, heat waves, and sandstorms even more severe than before. It is a perfectly engineered, closed loop of self-destruction. The heavily promoted green belt is not a cure for the city. It is an incredibly expensive, highly toxic illusion designed exclusively to calm the fragile nerves of real estate investors and visiting tourists. It is the mechanical life support system of a critically ill patient waiting to die, So, when the cash flow stops, what will the long beep on the heart monitor sound like? There is an unforgiving, absolute law in the discipline of civil and environmental engineering. Any large-scale structure or system that requires frantic, continuous, daily maintenance just to exist in its natural environment is ultimately a failed project. The sprawling, luxurious suburbs of Dubai are currently functioning only because there is currently enough capital to artificially hold back the physics of the Earth, but global economics are strictly cyclical. Imagine the inevitable, unavoidable downturn, a period of prolonged regional instability in the Gulf, a severe, long-term drop in global travel that deeply worsens the underlying tourism crisis. A critical moment when the massive influx of foreign investment finally slows down. When that happens, the inflated operational budgets will be slashed immediately. The roaring diesel engines of the sand-clearing machines will be turned off. The massive, energy-hungry desalination pumps will fall completely silent. In the deafening, profound quiet that follows, nature will waste absolutely no time reclaiming its stolen territory. Without the desperate, daily intervention of man, the dunes will resume their natural march. Within the very first month, the sand will pour over the useless concrete defensive walls. Within 6 months, it will fill the empty luxury swimming pools and block the front doors. Within a year, the sheer weight of the accumulating sand will crush the exhausted roofs. Within a few short years, the multi-million-dollar suburban expansions will become nothing more than modern, forgotten ruins. Monuments of sheer architectural arrogance, slowly and completely buried under the weight of an incredibly patient desert. The story of these shifting dunes is not just a localized problem for one specific city. It is a glaring, unavoidable warning sign about the profound fragility of global economic systems built entirely for endless, unchecked growth. The true hidden cost of extreme luxury is the relentless, exhausting, and ultimately unwinnable war against reality itself. If you value documentaries that dare to look beyond the glittering skyline to examine the hard, unforgiving economics underneath the surface, make sure to subscribe right now. The next critical warning sign is rarely where the official marketing brochure tells you to look. This video is an analytical documentary based strictly on available public data, urban planning models, and the principles of mechanical physics at the time of research. Regional economic and environmental conditions are subject to continuous fluctuation. This content critically examines macroeconomic systems, real estate structures, and urban policies. It is absolutely not intended as a personal attack on residents, nor does it constitute formal financial, investment, or personal travel advice.